Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari
Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari
Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari
Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari
Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari
Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari
Gopi Jana Vallabha
Yashodanandana Vrajajanandana Yamuna Yashodanandana Vrajajanandana Yamuna Yamuna Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Jaya Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Shri Shri Radha Krishna ki jai, Shri Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So welcome to today's lesson on the Nectar of Devotion, chapters 33 and 34. This thing's not moving. So let's repeat the invocation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So, as I said, today's lesson is covering the very short chapters, chapters 33 and 34, but very, very nice subject matter. Let us first repeat our respects to the Sat Goswamis. Nana Shastra Vicharanai Nipuno Saddharma Samstapako Lokanam Hitakarino Tribhuvane Manyo Sharanyakaro Radha Krishna Padaravinda Bhajana Nandena Mataliko Vanerupa Sanatana Raghuyago Sri Jiva Gopala Go. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the six Goswamis, namely Sri Sanatan Goswami, Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who are very expert in scrutinizingly studying all the revealed scriptures with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of all human beings. Thus they are honored all over the three worlds, and they are worth taking shelter of, because they are absorbed in the mood of the gopis and are engaged in the transcendental loving service of Radha and Krishna. So this chapter is a continuation of the last chapter, where in this chapter we continue with the indirect symptoms of ecstatic expressions of love toward Krishna. And the seven ecstatic secondary emotions, as you can see, is laughter, astonishment, chivalry, lamentation, anger, ghastliness, and dread. So, laughter, astonishment, chivalry, lamentation, anger, ghastliness, and dread seem to be things that people look for in any story or any novel that they would pick up to read and keep entertained, or perhaps in a movie that one would want to watch. But all of these things originate in the spiritual realm. They all have roots in the spiritual world. And what we experience in the material world, we've heard time and time again, is but a perverted reflection of that. So, in terms of laughter, uh, sometimes, so laughter in and of itself, and all of these qualities, they are actually not really spiritual qualities when they're material qualities, but when they linked to Krishna's pastimes, then they become spiritual. In and of themselves, they are not transcendental. There's nothing intrinsically transcendental about laughter, astonishment, anger. However, these emotions, when they become part of the mukhya rati, or the um, facilitation of Krishna's enjoyment with his devotees, then only they are transcendental. For example, um, one time Krishna, Srila Prabhupada tells half of how Krishna told the gopi friends that, my dear friends, I can take an oath that I've not stolen even one drop of yogurt from your pot. Now, we all know who has the name, who has been crowned Makanchur in Vrindavan, who has been given that name from the very beginning of his existence. But here, Krishna, he says with all conviction to the gopi that he swears, he takes an oath that he's not stolen even one drop of yogurt. And then he tells the gopi, but still, your friend Radharani is shamelessly smelling the fragrance of my mouth. Please tell her to stop this devious policy of putting her face close to mine. And when Krishna was speaking like this, the friends of Radharani couldn't even check their laughter. It is explained that the gopis, they wear these nose rings that are connected from their nose with a fine chain to their divine earlobes. And sometimes, when they're trying to conceal a smile, they pretend to fidget with that nose ring. So, one of our ISKCON artists was speaking about that when expressing the intrinsic details of a particular painting that she had done. So this laughter is quite a thing. There are many places where we come across laughter in Krishna's pastimes. Like sometimes when they see their shadows here and there in exaggerated ways. Sometimes the shadows become elongated due to the way the light is shining on an object. So similarly, when Krishna and the gopis, when they would see their shadows being exaggerated in these ways, so elongated, sometimes some parts of their bodies shortened, then Krishna and the gopis, they laugh greatly at this. And in this way, they enjoy many, many pastimes. So the gopi friends of Radha, when they dress in Krishna's yellow garment, and Radha's beloved Krishna is dressed in Radha's garment, which is blue like a monsoon cloud one time. And when the gopis saw this, they pointed at the divine couple. They gazed at them with sort of squinted, restless eyes, and they placed their hands over their mouth, like you see in this picture. Sometimes Radharani, she dresses as Krishna, and they exchange clothing. And Krishna, he uses Radharani's clothes. So when the gopis from the groves of Vrindavan witness these things, they start to laugh. One time, Jatila, Abhimanyu's mother, she thought she caught Radharani because her sort of occupation, mostly in Vrindavan, is to try to find a fault with Radharani escaping to meet with Krishna. So Jatila one time she thought she caught Srimati Radharani. So she covered her with the she was the body of who she thought she caught, Radharani, was covered with a sort of chada, with a second garment, a cloth. So she took this form to her mother Kotila, and in front of the mother, she now, with so much confidence, she lifted up the cloth, hoping to reveal the captive as Radha. But alas, it was Radharani's brother Subal dressed in disguise, and the gopis laughed loudly witnessing this. So so in this way, laughter becomes transcendental when it is experienced within the realm, that spiritual realm of Krishna's interaction with his topmost devotees. Then astonishment is also one of the qualities that is mentioned in this chapter. So astonishment sometimes We know that Devaki and Vasudev, they became so astonished when Krishna greeted them and touched their feet when he came back to Mathura. Arjuna, he becomes astonished when he sees the universal form. Rukmini becomes so astonished when Krishna jokes with her that he would leave her. So sometimes wandering in the forest, Krishna and the gopis, they see the full moon's light in many wonderful varieties of in the full moon's light, they see birds, beasts, vines, trees, and sometimes some they had known before, and some it's like new discoveries for them in this forest of Vrindavan. And in this way, they become sort of enraptured in the taste of this rasa of astonishment. And one time, the creator of the secondary creator of the universe, Lord Brahma, he was watching over the cows and the cowherd boys and how they are all dressed up in yellow garments and all had decorations of such valuable jewels around on their bodies. The boys, they were expanding four-arm forms and were being worshipped by like hundreds of other Brahmas. So all the cowherd boys, they began to express their joy for being with Krishna. And Brahma at this time, he became so astonished that he thought, what am I seeing here? Because now it was a good realization for him that he's not the only one approaching Krishna. There are Brahmas from all the other universes as well. So then the next quality is chivalry. So Prabhupada explains that on the bank of the Yamuna, there's, once there was this crackling sound of dry leaves and giggling from cowherd boys and the thundering from the sky. And Sridham, he at that time, he began to tighten his belt to fight with Krishna. They normally, before they start a fight, these cowherd boys, they have a habit of tightening their belt and then clapping their hands under their armpits, making a sound of readiness for the battle. So Sridham, he was doing this because he wanted to fight with Krishna. But Krishna was, Prabhupada explains, Krishna is the conqueror of the Aga demon. But here, this cowherd boy, he's now taking on Krishna. Why? Because this is an instance of chivalry in ecstatic love. It's satisfying Krishna's desire to engage in some fight. So, when the heart is determined to perform any noble deeds that are glorified by saints, and great personalities, that is what we call chivalry. So, sometimes to break into pieces the great festival of their pride, the acharyas explain Krishna, he starts to engage in graceful, sort of amorous battle with the gopis. In this way, he enjoys the chivalry ras of fighting with them, wrestling. So, and it in sometimes Srimati Radharani, she, like you see in this picture from Shivaram Swami's book, that Krishna is now beaten by the gopis and Radharani is holding him captive in this instance. And Krishna, he's enjoying this with great jubilation. Then we go on to the next uh, feeling that they experience, and this is lamentation. So, in lamentation, we hear that in the Srimad Bhagavatam and in so many places in scripture, that lamentation or any negative feeling, excuse me, any negative feeling leaves that place where Krishna is present. However, lamentation, anger, etc., they become, we said in the beginning, transcendental when Krishna wants to draw out some ras from this. So Prabhupada explains that in the 10th canto, 7th chapter of the 25th verse of the Bhagavatam, there's a description of Krishna being taken away by Trunavata. As Krishna was being carried up into the sky, all the gopis began to cry aloud and they approached Mother Yasoda. And you can imagine how she was feeling. And the gopis stated that they could not find the son of Nanda. He had been taken away by the whirlwind. This was in great lamentation that they were expressing this to Mother Yasoda. And another time, when Krishna was fighting with Kaliya, Mother Yasoda, she became so overwhelmed with lamentation. She said, Krishna is now entrapped within the hoods of the Kaliya snake, yet I am not tattered to pieces. So I must admit how wonderful is this preserving power of this material body. She sort of says it with sarcasm. This is lamentation in ecstatic love. So in the rasa dance, uh, as the rasa dance begins, Krishna he looks around and he notices, there's like about 64 million gopis. So he notices the different grades of gopis and he decides to leave all of them and take Srimati Radharani alone with him. And hiding at in a hiding with Srimati Radharani and escaping from the rasa dance, Krishna happily hears the gopis' lamentation. First of all of them are dancing, and the dance is going on at such a speed, and there's total absorption that Krishna is only dancing with me. And all of a sudden, when he leaves, they become so overwhelmed with lamentation of the sudden loss of their source of joy that they deeply lament. And Krishna, he together with Radharani, when they witness this from behind the bushes, it gives them a feeling of ecstatic love between them and the gopis, to note how dear and how surrendered the hearts of these devotees are. Excuse me. So the gopis, they begin at that time to appease themselves. Excuse me. To appease themselves from this lamentation from Krishna, they then begin to imitate the pastimes of Krishna. And when they imitate these pastimes of Krishna, we know the Acharya's teacher that the pastimes, the name, and the glories of Krishna are known different from him. So, in separation, when the gopis reenact these pastimes of Krishna, they feel some little form of relief. And then in that same Ras Leela, after fulfilling Radharani's desire, Krishna even leaves her. He takes her to another place and he leaves her. And seeing Radharani now experiencing a greater degree of lamentation at the loss of Krishna's association after Krishna's sudden departure, the gopis, they come and they start to pacify her. And all of them assemble together, eagerly desiring to see Krishna. They continue to glorify his qualities. And at Govinda Ghat, Krishna reappears before these gopis and he becomes absorbed they all become very much absorbed in transcendental bliss. The gopis, Rupa Goswami, he writes in one of his literatures that in a spot near Kalia Lake, um, you will come across the goddess Vrinda Devi, who lives there in the shape of a tulasi plant. So her body is wilting due to the fire of separation from Krishna. Her lamentation increases when she sees the new flower buds appearing on her branches, for she knows that Krishna is not here to enjoy them. So for a plant, the flower buds are actually the glory of its beauty. And uh, coming to terms with the fact that these buds, they blossom and they last for for a short period of time, but alas, Krishna is not here so she couldn't offer the sum and substance of her beauty in the form of these flower buds to Krishna. She begins to lament, and then she begins to appreciate the anguish the gopis feel um, with all humility and reverence, because she feels that what she's experiencing is but a tip of the iceberg of what these great devotees experience. So the gopis, they have pairs of parrots, and Uddhava uh, parrots. So they have so those parrot couples, they can still be heard in the streets of Mathura, repeating conversations of all the leelas that Krishna has enacted in Vrindavan. And sometimes they lament, these parrots. They say, when will I see the killer of the Mura demon again? He couldn't be found by the continuous searching of the gopis in the forest or on the banks of the Yamuna, where he surely went to hide. Oh, friend, they speak amidst themselves, when will he, upon seeing me, would break into a smile which would sway the whole universe with joy and then appear before me again? So sometimes it's explained that when the gopis were totally absorbed in this way in a forest made of flowers called Karuna Bhavan, their loud cries of lamentation filled the entire land of Vrindavan, that travelers who were passing by on the road would hear their cries of lamentation, and it would be such deepened sounds of lamentation that these travelers will cover their ears, and with tears pouring from their eyes, even they will run from Vrindavan, because these deep feelings of lamentation and ecstasy has got such a poignant effect on the heart of even a passerby. So the next quality that we go through is anger. So anger in Krishna's service. Sometimes Jatila, the mother of Abhimanyu, when she sees Krishna wearing a necklace that is, Krishna had in reality, his torso is quite elongated. His arms are very long. We hear in the descriptions of Krishna's beauty. So sometimes Krishna, he wears a necklace that's a little too short. And when Jatila, the mother of Abhimanyu, when she sees this short necklace around Krishna's neck, she understands that this jewel ornament, this necklace, has been given to him by Radharani. She therefore becomes absorbed in anger and begins, and the way she expresses this anger is she starts to dart looks of anger, anger-filled looks at Krishna from the from under the bow of her eyebrows. And Krishna very much enjoys this. In actual fact, Krishna does mention that he enjoys this rasa with these devotees better than the hymns that great sages compose. When sometimes Krishna, he also gets angry. When does Krishna get angry? Krishna only gets angry when sometimes they're trying to enjoy in one of these groves of Vrindavan with his associates, and some bold black bee comes and stings a gopi. Then she starts to cry, and Krishna becomes so angry. He'll pick up like perhaps a red lotus flower, and he will then try to uh, his shark-shaped earrings will violently shake, and then he will chase this bumblebee around in anger. So this is Krishna's way of experiencing anger. Because in the material world, anger is governed by the modes of material nature. But Krishna, because he's above the modes of material nature, and because everything originates in the spiritual world, there has to be some anger also coming uh, for, from that realm. So the next one is ghastliness. So there's a statement by Yamuna Acharya in this effect, that when he says that since I've begun to enjoy these transcendental exchanges of love, which are always newer and newer, Anannam Buddhi Vardhanam, as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says. So Yamuna Acharya says, ever since he's begun to relish these pastimes, whenever he remembers the pleasure of sex life in the material world, his lips curl and he wishes to spit on the idea. This is the instance of ecstatic love in ghastliness, when one develops a higher taste and one feels totally aghast uh, by the previous feelings of this material emotion. So sometimes the gopis, their faces are filled with charming playfulness. When they see sometimes all of a sudden there's a lotus flower growing from the dry ground, because they are unaware that some species of lotus grow not in ponds but also in the dry land, they become filled with shock and horror. Oh my God, what happened? This lotus is not growing in the water. In this way, they experience ghastliness. So the next one is dread. So Prabhupada explains that in terms of dread, one old devotee said, "My Lord, when we are away from you, we become so anxious to see you again. There is great misery in our lives. But then, when we do see you, there immediately becomes the fear of separation. Under these circumstances, both when we see you and we do not see you, we're subject to different kinds of tribulations." So is explaining that it's like contradictory mixtures. Rupa Goswami explains these are like contradictory mixtures of ecstatic love for Krishna. This ecstatic love is very palatable, and the expert critics have compared such ecstatic love to a mixture of yogurt, sugar candy, and a little black pepper. Even though you wouldn't imagine them being nice together and they seem contradictory in flavors, when they are combined in the right amount, Srila Rupa Goswami explains, the combined taste is extremely palatable. So sometimes when Krishna and the gopis enter into the forest groves, and wild bees, they are gathering pollen from the host of flowers, um, the gopis become a bit afraid when they see these huge bumblebees. And you know, when the bumblebees fly, they make this zzz, buzz noise. So Krishna, he calms them with sweet words at that time, and in this way, they experience dread when the gopis, not dread uh, aimed at Krishna, but dread from being at close range with these bumblebees. So that concludes the chapter 33. Now we go to chapter 34. So in chapter 34, Vaibhava, which stimulates and awakens the Staibhav, causing the devotee to relish a particular type of ecstatic love and affection for Krishna. Srila Prabhupada says the particular type of ecstatic loving sentiment that develops within the heart of a particular devotee is called Vaibhav. So the particular type of bhav is he's explaining here is vaibhav. When vaibhav stimulates the staibhav, there are various effects called anubhav, such as dancing, moving the eyebrows, and sattvika, crying, standing of hairs, etc. And vyabhichari bhavs, fear, astonishment, etc., are types of anubhavs. Srila Prabhupada says, and the resultant manifestations, such as moving of the eyebrows, fear, astonishment, and smiling, which have been explained herein before, are called anubhavs. So, uh, anubhavs are going to be have been explained in the previous chapters, and now Srila Rupa Goswami is giving us a greater insight into that. So then he explains that no one, while remaining on the material platform, should discuss these different descriptions of bhav and anubhav by quoting different statements of transcendental literatures. Such manifestations are displays of transcendental pleasure potency of the Lord. One should simply try to understand that on a spiritual platform there are many varieties of reciprocal love. So, therefore, we find that Krishna, his intimate association and experiences with the devotees are given to us as drops of mercy in this nectar of devotion. And Srila Prabhupada, astonishingly enough, even though this book reveals so much of the intimacy between Krishna and his devotees. It was one of the first books that Prabhupada wrote and asked the devotees to distribute on the streets to people at large. So, this understanding of these feelings, how does this happen? This happens when the Ladini Shakti herself descends into the heart of the devotee. So we discussed this at length when we were discussing the symptoms of bhav in the previous chapters of the Nectar of Devotion, under the subject of the symptoms of bhava in the seven stages that we went through. So Prabhupada writes, such loving exchanges should never be considered to be material. In the Mahabharata Bhishma Parva, it is warned that things which are inconceivable should not be subjected to arguments. Actually, the transactions of the spiritual world are inconceivable to us in our present state of life. So, sometimes when we read the scriptures, we may not fully understand certain things that are being described. And by the recommendation of what we just read, it's best for us to not reject it, but to simply leave it for a little while, continue with the chanting and continue studying. And as one advances, as one becomes more mature, these things become more revealed within the heart. What comes to mind is the instance of one of our very good friends. He's actually nowadays a very great preacher of the Bhagavad Gita. However, when he joined, he was saying that he picked up the Bhagavad Gita and he was so ecstatic to have the written words of Krishna. And when he started to read, he couldn't understand anything, even though he himself was a great academic in the material world. So he couldn't understand what the Bhagavad Gita was trying to explain to him. So he simply closed the book, put it back on his bookshelf, and he started chanting 16 rounds. And at that time, when he was narrating this to us, he explained that after he took up this process of chanting Hare Krishna, he could understand how the sound vibration of chanting actually purifies one's intelligence and helps one to come to the platform of understanding these various truths. So Prabhupada writes, great liberated souls like Rupa Goswami and others have tried to give us some hints of transcendental activities in the spiritual world. But on the whole, these transactions will remain inconceivable to us at the present moment. Understanding exchanges of transcendental loving service with Krishna is possibly only when one is in actual touch with the pleasure potency of the Supreme Lord, in other words, the Ladini Shakti. So that devotee, after some time of chanting 16 rounds of japa as attentively as he could, he picked up the Bhagavad Gita, and he found himself able to understand things, and he became a great preacher of the Bhagavad Gita up until today. Distributes a lot of Bhagavad Gitas and he preaches in his circles, even though nowadays he's become very, very successful in the material realm. So Prabhupada explains here that one understands it by mercy of the Ladini Shakti. What comes to mind very quickly here, I wanted to share with you, is one time Prabhupada went to a university in America, and prior to the program, Prabhupada was very perceptive of the people's state of mind, their level of understanding, etc. So he started this ecstatic kirtan, and the time period for giving the lecture was shorter than the time for the kirtan. So Prabhupada extended the kirtan and he gave a shorter lecture. And his disciples asked him, how come he spoke for so little, for such a short time? And Prabhupada expressed that they needed first to become purified by this chanting. And we find also for our own purification, Prabhupada introduced that prior to any Krishna Katha that we do, he, by example, set the tone that one chants the Jai Radha Madhava and Hare Krishna prayers. So, 5 symptoms for relishing sthai bhav. There are 5 symptoms: uh, fulfillment, manifestation, expansion, dispersion, agitation. And Prabhupada states sustenance, manifestation, expansion, reflection, and lamentation are the 5 visible symptoms in exchanges of ecstatic love. Different sthai bhavs manifest different symptoms when relished. One can understand a devotee's sthai bhav by observing which of the 5 symptoms he manifests when relishing transcendental pleasure. So recently I was reading of how Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was on parikram in Vrindavan, and one time he asked one of his sannyasi disciples, we've been on this Vrindavan parikram, which place do you like best? And the devotee mentioned that the place he liked best was Ter Kadamba, where Srila Rupa Goswami wrote this Nectar of Devotion. So then 6 months later, they were still doing another parikram of in Vrindavan, and they met at Radhakund. And at this time, now we all know from the glorification of Sri Radhakund that it is one of the topmost places. So then Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, he smiled at the devotee 6 months later, remembered what he said, and he said, your place is Ter Kadamba. So the sthai bhav of the person is being described here, that one can understand a devotee sthai bhav by observing which of the 5 symptoms he manifests when relishing transcendental pleasures. For example, sustained sense of fulfillment, a symptom of relishing Sudha Ras, neutral affection. Srila Prabhupada explains, in the nectar of devotion, in devotional service of neutrality, there's sustenance. In angry devotional service, there's lamentation, and so on. So all of these different emotions are there, and they reveal different things in the purified state. And if only a pure devotee is able to decipher this in others. So, who is qualified to understand rasa? From the previous slide, we heard that who is qualified? That person whose heart has been ripened with Krishna prema and who is experiencing this on a heightened level when the Ladini Shakti has now descended. An apparent pitiable condition in devotional service may appear distressing to the inexperienced student, but the feelings of the devotee's pitiable condition are considered to be ecstatic by expert devotees. So, what does this mean? This means that sometimes we may hear certain pastimes of the Lord. For example, early on in the year, we had we had been discussing pastimes of Lord Ram, and some very often it's there that when the Ram Katha begins, someone or the other in the audience will say, oh, but the Ramayana is such a sad book. Oh, but the Ramayana is full of sorrow. Every time I hear about the Ramayana, I feel so distressed. I don't like to read this book. I prefer the other literature describing Krishna's glories. Now, we all may have encountered that feeling in our early stages, or we may encounter people that feel this way. But these feelings are not pitiable, but they're ecstatic. For example, the subject matter of the Ramayana is sometimes considered pitiable and distressing to the heart, but actually, that is not a fact. The Ramayana narrates how Lord Ram was sent to the forest by his father just when he was going to be enthroned. So it's like joy cut short for the Ayodhya residents and for everybody, including Lord Ram. After Lord Ram's departure, Maharaj Dasarat, his father, died. In the forest, his wife Sita Devi was kidnapped by Ravan, and there was this great war. When Sita Devi was finally delivered from the clutches of Ravan, of course, we know it's Maya Sita, Ravan's whole family and kingdom and Ravan himself were vanquished. When Sita Devi came home, she was tried by fire, and after some days, she was again banished to the forest. Lakshman had to take her, so much of tears. All of these subjects in the Ramayana seem very pitiable, and they may appear very distressing to the reciter, but actually they are not. How can we verify the statement that they are not pitiable but ecstatic? The clue is given in the picture that I put here. If they were pitiable, why would Hanuman come and listen? Everything is transcendentally pleasing. Otherwise, why would Hanuman, the great devotee of Lord Ram, readily read daily about the activities of Lord Ram as described in the Ramayana itself? The fact is that in any of the above mentioned 12 transcendental humors of devotional service, everything is transcendentally pleasing. We may find it pitiable, but Hanuman wants to hear about it again and again and again. It is said that even after Lord Ram left uh, for his eternal abode, Hanuman, on the instruction of Lord Ramachandra, remains in the material world. And wherever there is Ram Katha, Hanuman would go in disguise or somehow or the other make it his business to be part of the audience there because he relishes hearing about these pastimes of Lord Ram. So those who are disqualified, Srila Rupa Goswami mourns. In this connection, for persons who are not in the fire of false renunciation, Srila Rupa Goswami mourns in this connection for persons who are in the fire of false renunciation, the dry speculative habit, and who neglect devotional service. Persons who are attached to ritualistic ceremonies recommended in the Vedas and to the impersonal Brahman cannot relish the transcendental pleasure of devotional service. So, these subject matters, just like you have different diets for people of different health capacities, similarly, we have different parts of the scripture to satisfy the relishment of certain devotees. Sometimes, if we're not mature enough, if we overeat, if it's or someone over dishes out prasadam, we get indigestion. So similarly, the certain subject matters in scripture, they become unpalatable, cannot be digested by these kind of people who are in the category of being disqualified. That means those who are in false renunciation, attached to dry speculation, who neglect devotional service, who are attached to rituals in the Vedas, and who are still attached to the impersonal Brahman. These type of people, their diet is very different. Higher subject matters is not relishable for such people. Then Srila Rupa Goswami explains guarding the nectar of devotion. Srila Rupa Goswami further warns that those who are eligible for tasting this bhakti ras should carefully keep it hidden from those who are unqualified or agnostic to devotional service. Srila Rupa Goswami advises, therefore, that the devotees who have already tasted the nectar of devotion be very careful to protect devotional service from such dry speculators, formal ritualistic elevationists, and impersonal salvationists. Devotees should protect their valuable jewel of spiritual love from the clutches of thieves and burglars. So one has to always uh, uh, tread with tact in the manner of preaching to others. We understand that to preach from the 10 offenses to the holy name, that to preach the glories of the holy name to one who does not have sufficient faith is an offense. So, what to speak of the glories of the Lord? So, this nectar of devotion is actually preserved in the clutches of the heart of a devotee and not freely distributed because of this. So there's two important qualifications. This chapter is now going to is ending here with two important points about the qualifications that we need to understand and relish this rasa. Bhakti rasa is incomprehensible to the non devotees. We all know that Srila Rupa Goswami has explained in the Nectar of Instruction that when one is jaundiced, sugar candy will taste bitter. So, similarly, when one is not sufficiently ripened or matured in one's devotional practices, bhakti ras is incomprehensible to non devotees. Only persons who have dedicated their lives unto the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead can relish the nectar of devotion. Only in Bhava Bhakti can one actually relish rasa, when one transcends the status of ecstatic love and thus becomes situated on the highest platform of pure goodness. One is understood to have cleansed the heart of all material contamination. In that pure stage of life, one can taste this nectar, and this tasting capacity is technically called rasa or transcendental mood. And once tasting that, like Yamuna Acharya told us, all the so called pleasures of the material sphere become totally unpalatable. The higher taste becomes, we become fixed. The Stahi Bhava becomes awakened, has staying power, that we don't want anything else. We only run after the lotus feet of Sri Sri, Radha, and Krishna. So, that in effect is these covering the subject matter of these two chapters. Are there any questions, corrections, or comments? If not, there is. If you've written any question on the chat or you're typing, um, we'll wait for that. Someone's typing a question, is it? Okay, so we conclude there since there's no more questions. No questions. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you. Hare Krishna.